Well, hi, I'm Phil Heimlich. I'm a conservative Republican, though I will say I lean libertarian. I'm also a Christ follower, and I call this podcast The Radical Middle. Something that really bugs me is when there is a public figure who we support and we agree with, but then it turns out that he's crooked, he's corrupt. We have a tendency not to admit it because this is a guy that we supported. We tend to sweep it under the rug rather than admit that this guy was dishonest. And let me give you a great example. Clarence Thomas, the Supreme Court Justice. I always admired him because he's an African American, but he doesn't support quotas and he's opposed to affirmative action, reverse racism, all that kind of stuff. I looked up to him for that. But then it turns out that over the last 20 years, he has accepted $4.2 million in undisclosed gifts. I'm talking about luxury travel on private planes and on yachts to the most expensive resorts in the world. Most of the money came from a billionaire named Harlan Crow. And people say, well, Crow didn't have cases before the Supreme Court. Yeah, he didn't, but he was an extremely conservative Republican. And many cases come down to whether it's a liberal result or a conservative result. If you've taken $4.2 million in gifts from somebody who's on the right, how are you likely to rule in one of those cases? What's worst and most corrupt about what Thomas did wasn't just accepting the gifts, but he failed to report them. Justices are required to list publicly any gifts they received. But all this luxury travel and the resorts and everything, he never listed it. And when he was confronted with this, Justice Thomas said, well, I considered it personal hospitality. You see, personal hospitality is like when somebody has you over for dinner or invites you over to spend the night at his house. That's personal hospitality. Luxury travel is not personal hospitality. Thomas has also been dishonest in one other way because his wife was very active in trying to overturn the 2020 election. Given her activity in that, when those cases came before the Supreme Court, Thomas should have recused himself, but he didn't. Let's face it, guys, we may have looked up to this guy for a long time, but he turns out to be utterly corrupt. I'm Phil Heimlich, and this is The Radical Middle.